From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you, and in the spotlight today, the just-released numbers on 2021 Kansas net farm income from the Kansas Farm Management Association here at K-State. This is a highly sought-after annual summary of data from KFMA member farms, considered a key indicator of the state of the Kansas production agriculture economy. We'll be joined by the KFMA's Kevin Herbel, Jordan Steele, Lindsey Bryant, Joni James, Will Feldkamp, Gregg Althauser, and Dillon Rapp to break this report down. It ended up being a record-setting year for net farm income in Kansas. And further ahead, this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Gregg Eyestone on getting those warm season vegetable transplants off to a good start in their new garden setting. That's what's ahead on this Agriculture Today. Thanks for tuning in once again. This is our Thursday edition of Agriculture Today, as we get into some detail, as much as time allows, on the new report fresh out of the Kansas Farm Management Association at Kansas State University. As you're well aware, every year the KFMA pulls together the data from the previous year and comes up with a summary of net farm income trends in the state of Kansas and all the associated numbers that go into that. Well, that report is now out as of yesterday. Joining us is Kevin Herbel, who is the Executive Director of the KFMA. And in a moment, we'll go around the room, if you will, and visit with 6 of the economists representing the KFMA and talk about the local numbers there as far as those areas go. Kevin, when one gets a first glance at this report, they go right to, of course, naturally, that net farm income state average number. And this one for 2021, frankly, jumps right off the page.
It does, Eric. Certainly a very strong income year in 2021. Our net income, just to go straight to that number, $310,230 at the state level that we averaged. That is a 70% increase from about $174,000 in 2020. Result of that certainly coming from strong grain prices, which everyone is aware of. Good yields into those strong prices. Right now, kind of front and center to all of our thinking is the costs that are up, input costs and the level of those. And as we think about 2021, a lot of these inputs would have been purchased in late 2020 as that year was ending in the fall and purchases being made. During a 6-month period of time from late 2020 to mid-21, we saw a incredible increase in input costs. But a lot of these inputs would have been incurred by the farms prior to those increases. So a situation in 21, certainly with the good prices, along with good yields, and then input costs that came before the increases. And so that working together to a very strong income for the year. Certainly some downward pressure a little bit on that income from the livestock side as increased returns on the crop side mean increased feed costs in many cases for the livestock side of things. But by and large, strong demand on the livestock side helps support that some. It is our highest level of livestock value of farm production at the state level, the highest it's been since 2014. So certainly some strength in a number of different sectors. Probably one of the more telling things of the fact of the yields being good, if we look at our net crop insurance income in 21, premiums were greater than the indemnities received across the state. So net crop insurance income is actually a negative number, as those premiums were greater than the indemnities received in all 6 of the associations, which that has not been the case for a fair number of years.
All right. Well, over the next few moments, if we might check in with the area economists one by one and talk about the numbers specific to their regions of the state. First, we'll talk with Jordan Steele, who is the executive economist for the KFMA for Northwest Kansas. Jordan, the number that you sport for your area out of this report, the net farm income average, $399,000 and change. So what led to such an impressive showing on the part of your farms up there in 2021?
I think there were several factors on that big number. Like Kevin said, it kind of had the perfect storm there where we had our normal input costs, but then we had rising commodity prices coming through the year. One thing that was pretty interesting as far as our crop yields, we had really good wheat across the association, mid 50s on an average, but we had a lot of 70 and 80 bushel pockets there. Our dryland fall crops were, I would consider subpar, a little bit under average, mid 60s on the corn and the milo, mid 20s on dryland soybeans. But our irrigated corn was the enterprise average was 215 bushels the acre, so that's above average there. So it was odd to see we had good irrigated fields right next to poor dryland fields. I don't know what the weather pattern was like to get that done, but we had good yields there, and of course, just the price coming up for everything really helped. The other part is, on that 399,000. That brings our average up to, for a 5-year average, to almost 180,000 for our net farm incomes. And that's really helping people move forward on this.
It's going to be hard to match that in 2022 because of higher input costs, but your producers seem to be faring well, even though they've had weather challenges then, Jordan.
Yes, they have. And the weather challenges, I think that's going to be something of concern this year. We're pretty dry in Northwest. We did get a few showers the last couple weeks, but we're dry, and it's going to be very apparent. But so far, everyone's handling it. I think the wheat's going to come up, and it'll be all right, I'll bet.
Thanks, Jordan. Jordan Steele, KFMA executive economist, Northwest Kansas. Next, we turn to Southwest Kansas. Lindsey Bryant with us. She's the executive economist for the KFMA in that area. And looking at that number, net farm income in 2021, Lindsey, of $465,000 plus. That's beyond impressive. How did your folks attain that?
Yeah, we thought last year was a good year at $236,000. So yeah, nearly doubling that this year, with a large portion of our farms over the $300,000 mark even. So yeah, that's nearly double of last year, with about half of the government payment support that we had in 2020. So kind of the same thing as Jordan. Good yields, good prices kind of came together with that lagging rise in input costs. Our yields were really pretty good, central and eastern counties. Out in Southwest, we always, of course, have some spotty issues, whether it's missing rain or hail or whatever it might be. But the further west you go, the drier it is. They had some very severe drought. So definitely seeing lower yields in that direction, but overall still very, very good. Wheat was really what I noticed was the biggest difference in yield from 2020 to 2021. Pretty significant jump in yield there. And it was interesting listening to Jordan, because I hadn't really looked at theirs yet, but we kind of had the same thing between the dryland and the irrigated too, with the fall crops, with dryland not really being that much of a significant change, but on the irrigated side, especially the irrigated corn, pretty big jump there. But going into 2022, we're very, very dry, pretty much all across, not just further west now. So we'll see how it ends up panning out.
We can't deny it's been a tough 2022 so far for folks in Southwest Kansas. Mm-hmm. Your producers, though, have dealt with adversity of these kinds before, maybe not a drought like this in some time, but they have the management chops, it seems, Lindsey, to figure out a way here.
Yeah. It typically usually overall seems to work out. They're pretty good at not getting too concerned too quickly and just writing it out and seeing how things end up.
Thanks, Lindsey. Once again, that's Lindsey Bryant for the Kansas Farm Management Association in Southwest Kansas. South Central Kansas, before we take our break here, and talking with economist there, Joni James. Joni, the number that South Central posts isn't nearly as shiny, if you will, as the other two areas we've talked about so far, but the $265,000 net farm income for South Central Kansas, that's nothing to sneeze at either, is it?
No, it's not. And when you get to it, we are the lowest of the net farm income for the 6 associations. But with that said, it's the highest we've seen in the last 5 years, if not longer, as what Kevin alluded to earlier. So our 5-year average comes in at about $132,000. So when you think about that $265,000 for 2021, it is a net farm income that was very much appreciated by our farmers. And when you look at that, I know others have talked about increased yields, different things. Really, we saw about a 40% increase from our 2020 net farm income of $188,000. When I tried to evaluate what that difference was, I think it goes back to that commodity prices like they've alluded to, because really our yields were pretty much average in 2020, and they stayed consistently steady and maybe even slightly less in 2021. And yet we still saw that increase in our net farm income. And our value of farm production increased by 14%, coming in at $813,000 for our association. So really pretty good. So really it alludes back to, I think, just that difference in that commodity prices really makes a big difference.
When you look at the South Central numbers, not only for 2021, but going back a bit, you mentioned the 2020 number as well. The second year in a row that South Central Kansas has seen a good net farm income after several years of not so good. So are things turning around in that area?
You know, I definitely think so. We're one of those associations that there's so much variability within our association itself between soil type and moisture. It makes a big difference where those yields come in. And we see that right now. The lower tier of our association probably has too much water. And I have counties in our association that until last week didn't receive moisture since last September. So significantly variability. So the last 2 years, we've seen a much more leveling out. More of the areas had decent moisture, decent planting conditions, that sort of thing, and then those decent prices versus going back to 2017 and that $33,000 net farm income really shows the variation that you can have in our area from $33,000 to $265,000.
Joni, thank you. Joni James, economist for KFMA in South Central Kansas. Once again, we're reviewing the just-released numbers from the Kansas Farm Management Association regarding 2021 net farm income. Talking with staff of the association and the executive director, Kevin Herbel, about what those numbers are saying. We'll return with them shortly after this break. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Once more, we're taking a quick look at the summary on net farm income for the state of Kansas for 2021, just compiled and released by the Kansas Farm Management Association. The group of economists who work up the numbers, along with the executive director, Kevin Herbel, with us today. Talking now with Will Feldkamp. Will is the KFMA economist stationed in north central Kansas who contributed to these numbers. Well, Will, let's take a look at north central and the number that was posted, $271,000 average net farm income. Pretty sound number, and it's continuing a trend in your area that has been in place for a couple of years now of very solid economics, isn't it?
Yeah, Eric, that's certainly trending in the right direction. I think we've been up for the last 3 or 4 years, an increase up around 100,000 from 2020. We were right around 173,000 for net farm income then. Our efficiency has gotten better. We have seen an increase in crop production costs of about $20 per acre compared to 20. But that was more than covered by an increase in gross crop value of about $80. So that spread, again, those crop production costs have not quite caught up. We'll start to see that more in 22 is certainly the fear and what we're talking to farmers about and their biggest worry at our spring farm visits. Mm-hmm. Before I get into the yields, I will touch on the livestock. That certainly was not a contributing factor to the growth in net farm income in our area and probably statewide. Our cow-calf operations and averages did not cover their variable costs, unfortunately, and just with the price of alfalfa and, factor in $7, $8 corn, if they're feeding them and finishing them out, that contributed to, not very good numbers on the livestock side of things. So yield-wise in our area, we had phenomenal corn. We averaged 123 bushel, which I think was probably a record, certainly better than the 5-year average. Our milo was around 100 bushel. And like Jordan said, our wheat, we had, 70, 75 bushel averages for some people. Even though our total average was 53, we ran into some hail issues in some places. Soybeans was probably the one thing that people were most disappointed in. It had the potential to be 50, 55, and we just didn't catch that rain that we needed in August to finish it out. But, for the most part, we average 40 bushel, which we've been spoiled with higher bushel averages than we probably have been used to in the past. So I think people were most disappointed in their soybeans. But overall, certainly a fantastic year for our producers. And we, can't wait to see what this year brings.
Just a quick aside here, cost management imperative, and it's going to be more so in 2022's numbers. Are your producers doing anything out of the ordinary or special to handle those costs to their benefit?
I think more and more of them are looking at on-farm storage of either fertilizer or chemical, not only from a cost standpoint, but just from an accessibility standpoint. They feel they need to have that stuff in their possession, or they may not be able to get it when they need it. So we're starting to see more and more infrastructure from that side of things to help try to control that and manage everything that they can.
Very well. Will, thank you. Will Feldkamp, economist, KFMA, North Central Kansas. And next we move on over to Northeast Kansas and find out what the numbers say in that region. Gregg Althauser is the executive economist for the KFMA in the Northeast. A number that the producers can live with here is an average $304,000 plus in Northeast Kansas. Well, Craig, how do you read that, and what was the catalyst behind that number?
Well, several things, and a similar story to what we've heard so far in different parts of the state, but this represented our third year in a row, really, of very good economic performance, good profits, good to very good. But that followed up 4 years where we don't want to have a short-term memory here, but 4 years prior to that, from 15 to 18, we had subpar profits and really one negative year, and it stretched on for a long time. So it was very welcome to see these last 3 years come, but in particular, the high numbers we had last year. We had really good corn yields for the second year in a row, averaged around 170 bushel dryland corn in Northeast Kansas. That's a very good number. Bean yields were even higher than they were in 2020. In 21, they averaged around 55 bushels, which was up 10+% over the prior year, and that's a strong number. And of course, we had good prices. Government payments didn't contribute as much as a lot of people might think to the profitability in Northeast Kansas. They were actually lower in 21 than they were in 20 or even 19, and at a similar level to where they were in 2018. So obviously they were welcome and helped, but not just a real significant part of what we saw in the results.
Mm-hmm. Your producers are finding ways to navigate these input costs, and what tacts are they taking to deal with that right now, Craig?
Yeah, well, probably the biggest thing they're doing differently is just even more flexibility in planning ahead and timing of making purchases and looking at securing inputs, both for potential price reasons and just the ability to secure those inputs when you can. That's become a bit of an issue, and there's been a lot of flexibility in farmers being willing to look at this differently and making purchases of inputs much earlier or sooner or at a different time during the year than maybe they did 3-4 years ago.
Craig, thank you. Gregg Althauser is the executive economist, KFMA in Northeast Kansas. And lastly, as we have our roundtable of economists here, we hear about Southeast Kansas and the net farm income number in that area. Dillon Rapp, economist with the KFMA there. Your number, strikingly similar to that in Northeast Kansas that Gregg Althauser just shared, $306,000 in net farm income last year. Dillon, what do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I think I could echo a lot of what Craig said. It was a pretty similar year down here in Southeast Kansas, too. One thing that set it apart was that we had a positive net return to management, or kind of an economic profit on every one of our major crop enterprises, and that normally doesn't happen. So probably the big difference between 2020 and 2021 would be that we had a very profitable corn enterprise. I've been doing this for 5 years, and our corn has always covered the variable costs or the cash costs to get it in and get it out, but it's never covered those fixed or economic costs we like to talk about, like depreciation and operator labor and opportunity costs of capital invested and things like that. And it was actually our most profitable enterprise in 2021. So just a big difference there. And so I had kind of been wondering for a lot of my time here in Southeast Kansas, why are we growing corn? It seems like the soybean thing's been working out pretty good. And then 2021 comes along and corn is by far our most profitable enterprise. So just a very good year from that standpoint.
But as you mentioned, their soybeans are a staple in Southeast Kansas. They did well likewise in 2021?
Correct. Yeah, actually, double crop soybeans and full season soybeans were our second and third most profitable enterprise. And by the time you add the wheat profit onto the double crop beans, it winds up being a little more profitable of an enterprise together than what the full season soybeans were. But both were profitable and still pretty strong, although yields were not quite as strong as we've seen the previous 2 or 3 years. Down just a little bit, didn't catch some of the timely rains that we have maybe the last couple of years, but overall pretty decent yields on the soybeans too.
Do want to give a nod to your livestock producers. You've cow-calf in particular down there in that part of the world. Not as rosy a picture on that side?
No, our cow-calf producers did better than they have the last couple of years. They're covering their variable costs, but not covering those fixed costs we were talking about earlier to pay themselves a salary for their time or depreciation on the equipment it takes to operate a livestock operation. But they were covering their variable or their cash costs, and it was a more positive return above variable cost than it's been the last few years. They just didn't see the increase that we saw in a lot of our crop enterprises from the previous years.
By and large, things are sitting well in your area, economically
Correct.
speaking.
Yes.
All right, Dillon, thank you. Dillon Rapp, Southeast Kansas, economist for Kansas Farm Management Association. And we'll cap off our discussion here, bringing Kevin Herbel back in. Again, these numbers are now available for folks to review out there, or will be soon.
That is correct. The executive summary has been posted, which is just an overall summary of all the numbers. The individual reports, both whole farm for the state level in each region, as well as enterprise summary results, will be posted to our department's website, agmanager.info, and over the next week or so, a lot of these numbers will be getting posted and available for people to see.
Very well. Well, again, congratulations to you and your team. It's a yeoman effort to pull all of this together, and it's indicative, again, of where we stand economically in Kansas agriculture. Important information on so many levels, and we appreciate your time and that of your economists. Kevin, thank you for joining us here.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to serve our KFMA members and the farm families, the ag industry of Kansas through this work.
Kevin Herbel there, the executive director of the Kansas Farm Management Association out of Kansas State University. You can see directly the 2021 executive summary of the Net Farm Income Report from the KFMA at agmanager.info, agmanager.info. We'll be back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. Coming your way now on Agriculture Today, this week's horticulture segment. For you vegetable gardeners who have been eagerly awaiting a chance to get those vegetable transplants started, well, we're into that season as the calendar reads. The weather has not been all that cooperative in that venture. We're going to talk about starting transplants and protecting them from adverse elements today. Gregg Eyestone, Riley County Extension Horticulture Agent, has joined us here. This is the time, Gregg, although there is some flexibility in when we can put out such things as tomatoes, peppers, other warm season vegetables.
Yes, so of course we need soil temperatures to be up so those roots can get developed. And so just recently have we reached that temperature in our soils. As you notice right now with very warm temperatures, that plants can catch up pretty quickly. So I guess I'm not really concerned about being the first one in the ground. With the high winds that we've recently had, waiting it out till hopefully those will subside as we get into a more extended growing season and be maybe a little easier on us at least to get those established.
Before even thinking about planting, let's talk a moment about selecting transplants. For durability here, that's a very important thing, you say.
It is, whether it's a tomato or a petunia. We want something that's short, stocky, dark green. Those are our healthiest plants. Give us our best opportunity to be successful at gardening. So as we get into extended season here, our tomatoes and plants will probably be getting larger and larger when they're at the garden centers. And ideally, we still want to select the shorter ones that are more appropriate for getting established in our gardens. If you don't have that opportunity, you have a large plant, you have to get it in the ground, some type of wind protection for probably 4 or 5 days, maybe even a little bit longer. Just depends on the different sites and things like that. But probably need to protect it from the strong wind. And so people have been very creative over the years on how to do that. I think olden days we used like a wooden shingle placed around the transplant. That's still viable. What we're trying to do is get those roots established and anchored, and so something to keep the top from blowing the roots out of the ground is what we're looking at.
As far as planting itself, though, fairly simple procedures here. You want to put that root ball roughly level to the soil around it?
I think so. So those roots are at a specific position on the plant and getting the oxygen that is required for root development. So ideally, yes, you plant them at the same level as your grade of your soil. Now, tomatoes do have the capability of forming some adventitious roots along the stem. So there are some gardeners that plant them deeper than that root ball. And that does work, but it does take a time for that plant to adjust to form roots along that stem. And so that's kind of slowing down the process of getting that plant up and producing the way you want it, I think. So if your plants are really long or leggy, if you will, and that's going to protect them from breaking off, then that is an option that you can use, is to plant it deeper. But ideally, we do plant them at the same level as they were growing in their container for quicker, better root establishment and production down the road.
Starter fertilizers to get those transplants, whatever they might be, off and running in good shape. Is that an advisable idea?
You sure can. It's not probably going to hurt anything, but those are usually used for our colder soils. The nutrients aren't quite as available to our young root systems, and so on a warmer soil like this, getting water, it's not as critical. Soil testing is always recommended to know if you need any added nutrients, and we can correct it with that. But if you haven't done the soil testing and you want to add some starter solution, you can. It doesn't require much at all. A little bit of phosphorus is what we're talking about. And then you just follow your regular fertilizer practices after that, whether you've already added compost or manures or something to the existing soil, or if you're using some supplemental nitrogen along the growing season.
Gregg, thank you, as always.
Been a pleasure, Eric, and I wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you, sir. On getting those vegetable transplants up and going strong, Gregg Eyestone, Ridley County Extension horticulture agent, with us on this week's horticulture segment. Well, our time's away once more. Thanks for being along with us. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.